I used to think big change came from big effort, like I had to overhaul everything overnight to feel different. But that mindset kept me stuck, exhausted, inconsistent, and constantly restarting. The truth is, real transformation begins with something smaller, 1%. Before we dive in, take a second to like, drop your biggest habit struggle in the comments, and subscribe to Simple Stroke Official. Because here, we talk about the quiet rules that actually work, the ones that turn chaos into calm progress. The 1% rule sounds almost too simple. Get 1% better every day. Not 10, not 50, just 1. But that tiny shift, repeated over time, creates results that feel like magic. Because small doesn't mean weak. Small means sustainable. It started for me after a burnout year. I'd set huge goals, save half my income, work out daily, wake up at 5. And for 2 weeks, I crushed it. Then, like always, I collapsed under the weight of my own expectations. So I asked myself, what if I stopped chasing perfection and started chasing progress? That's where the 1% rule came in. I didn't invent it. I just decided to actually live it. One small, consistent improvement at a time. The first thing I applied it to was money. Instead of trying to save 30% of my paycheck overnight, I saved 1%. That's it. Barely noticeable. But when I stuck with it, something clicked. I was finally building a habit that didn't fight me back. A month later, I increased it to 2%, then 3%. Slowly, I built momentum. By the end of the year, I was saving more than I ever had, without the stress, guilt, or burnout. The lesson was clear. Slow is smooth, and smooth becomes fast. Then I tried it with my routines. I stopped setting massive morning plans I couldn't maintain. Instead, I just added one small upgrade: make my bed. Then I added another: drink water before coffee. Each micro-habit became a brick in a stable foundation. It's wild how the smallest actions build the biggest confidence. Every 1% improvement whispered, "You're moving." And when you start believing that, momentum becomes automatic. Progress isn't loud. It's quiet repetition that compounds in the background. By month 2, I realized something profound. The 1% rule doesn't just build habits, it builds identity. You stop being the person who tries and start becoming the person who does. Tiny wins stack into quiet confidence. That's why most people never change. They chase intensity, not consistency. They sprint until they burn out, then blame discipline. But the real issue isn't effort, it's scale. You're trying to lift your life with one hand instead of building leverage. With the 1% rule, leverage comes from time. 1% progress compounded daily equals 37 times better in a year. That's math, but also mindset. Because each day you're proving that small effort still counts. I applied it to fitness next. I stopped chasing perfect workouts and started walking 10 minutes a day. Just 10, then 15, then 20. Eventually, it became a lifestyle. Consistency made results inevitable. The best part? It never felt like struggle. The 1% rule removes pressure. It teaches your brain to love progress instead of perfection. Because when improvement is small enough to feel easy, your resistance stays quiet, and your results get loud later. I even used it to repair relationships. Instead of grand gestures, I sent one message a day: a thank you, a check-in, a kind word. Those tiny moments rebuilt bonds I thought were lost. Proof that small effort, done consistently, heals deeply. By the 3rd month, I had proof everywhere. My savings were up, my body stronger, my focus sharper, my relationships calmer. And none of it came from giant goals, just small ones that refused to quit. That's the secret people miss. Growth isn't supposed to feel dramatic. It's supposed to feel boring. Repetition builds reality. If it feels quiet, you're probably doing it right. Progress whispers before it roars. The 1% rule also changed how I saw time. I stopped expecting results in weeks and started thinking in years. Suddenly, patience became power. Because when you commit long-term, Every day feels lighter. You're not chasing, you're compounding. It's funny, the slower I moved, the faster I grew. The less I forced, the more I achieved. Because real change doesn't come from intensity, it comes from integrity. Small promises kept daily build self-trust, and self-trust builds everything else. I started using the rule for learning too. 10 minutes of reading a day. No pressure to finish a book, just to open one. That simple consistency built knowledge quietly, until one day I realized I'd read more that year than in the past 5 combined. The rule gave structure to everything chaotic in my life. Instead of trying to control everything at once, I just asked, what's my 1% today? That question grounded me. It made every day feel winnable. And that's the beauty of the 1% mindset. It doesn't demand perfection, it invites participation. You can miss a day, stumble, restart, and still win. Because consistency isn't about never falling, it's about never quitting for long. I began to see proof in others too. A friend used the rule to pay off debt, 1% more payment each month. Another used it to build a small business, one product improved weekly. None of them rushed, yet all of them changed completely. The 1% rule isn't about speed, it's about staying power. It protects you from overwhelm by shrinking your focus to something you can actually handle. And once you handle small things well, big things follow naturally. By month 4, I noticed something else. Peace. I wasn't chasing goals anxiously anymore. My life had rhythm, not rush. That calm confidence was the quiet reward the 1% rule promised all along. The more I practiced it, the more I realized this rule isn't just about success, it's about self-respect. Every day you choose effort over excuse, you reinforce that you're worth showing up for, even when progress is invisible. That shift changes everything. You stop waiting for motivation because discipline becomes identity. And once something's part of who you are, you don't have to force it. The habit runs on autopilot, powered by belief. I used to think change had to feel dramatic to count. Now I see it's the opposite. The most meaningful growth is so quiet you barely notice it, until one day your whole life feels lighter, sharper, and more aligned. When people ask how I turn things around, I smile, because the truth sounds too simple. I just got 1% better every day. No hacks, no hustle, just patience. But that patience built a completely different life. The 1% rule taught me that consistency compounds and chaos depletes. You don't need to change everything. You just need to start and keep starting. One tiny step at a time is still forward. That's how transformation hides in plain sight. The more I lived by the 1% rule, the more I understood why most people quit. They want fireworks, not flickers. But every explosion fades. Steady sparks, though, build warmth that lasts. That's what daily discipline feels like, quiet but permanent. By the 5th month, my finances looked different. Not because I earned more, but because I stopped leaking small amounts daily. Every tiny decision mattered. Skipping one impulse purchase felt small, but repeating it for months built real control. I started using a tracker, just a notebook where I marked daily wins. 1% progress might be invisible, but written proof turns it visible. Those little check marks reminded me that success was already happening. Some days, progress was simple: getting out of bed on time, reading one page, saving $5. Other days, it was just staying calm instead of reacting. Because emotional discipline is progress too, even if your bank account doesn't show it yet. Slowly, the 1% rule became my lens for everything. When something felt overwhelming, I'd break it down until it felt doable. That shift turned impossible into in progress. And honestly, that's where most miracles begin. I started noticing results everywhere. My mornings were calmer, my room cleaner, my thoughts clearer. People think habits build life, but really, they build identity. One invisible layer at a time until you wake up stronger without realizing why. I used to chase quick wins. Now I chase quiet wins. They don't give you adrenaline, but they give you stability. The kind of peace that stays even when life gets messy. That's worth more than any temporary motivation high. The 1% rule doesn't just change your habits, it rewires your standards. Once you prove you can improve slightly every day, mediocrity feels foreign. You start craving growth the way others crave comfort. By month 6, I realized my days had flipped. I wasn't forcing habits anymore, they were pulling me. Momentum had taken over. That's the moment small progress stops being effort and becomes identity, when discipline becomes default. It's strange, but the less I pushed, the more I grew. The 1% rule removes ego from the equation. You stop proving and start improving. And ironically, that's what builds unstoppable confidence, quiet proof stacked daily. I also learned the value of forgiveness. Some days, my 1% just meant surviving. That's okay. The rule isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Even slow progress beats guilt-fueled burnout every single time. I started applying it to mindset too. 1% more gratitude, 1% less complaining, 1% more patience. These mental shifts didn't cost money, but they multiplied peace, and peace, I learned, compounds faster than profit. By month 7, I noticed I no longer compared myself to others. The 1% rule made comparison pointless. I was too focused on my own baseline. That's the freedom consistency gives. You measure progress by your past, not by someone else's highlight reel. My work improved too. Instead of chasing deadlines, I built systems. Just 1% better workflows daily. Over time, projects that used to drain me became effortless. Small refinements replaced stress with flow. That's when I understood the secret behind every overnight success. They weren't overnight at all. They were built 1% at a time, in silence. The spotlight just caught them after years of compounding. I noticed how my language changed. I stopped saying someday. I started saying next step. The 1% rule turns dreams into direction. You stop wishing, start walking, and even slow walkers reach their destination if they never stop. The more I practiced it, the lighter life felt. Discipline stopped being this heavy, punishing concept. It became peaceful, like brushing your teeth, automatic and natural. That's when I knew the rule had done its job. By month 8, I had a rhythm. Finances stable, health steady, mind clear. Nothing flashy, just flow. People called it luck. I called it quiet effort repeated long enough to look easy. That's the real definition of mastery. The best part? I started teaching it to others. Friends overwhelmed by chaos, coworkers burnt out from chasing perfection. Every time I shared the 1% rule, I saw the same relief in their eyes, permission to breathe while still improving. That's when it hit me. The 1% rule isn't just personal growth, it's contagious calm. Once you embody it, others feel safer to slow down too. It's like collective exhale, the kind the world desperately needs. I realized I no longer feared starting over. Because when you trust small beginnings, failure doesn't scare you anymore. You can rebuild anything, habits, income, identity, as long as you're willing to start small again. At this point, the rule wasn't even a rule, it was a philosophy, a way of living that replaced overwhelm with ownership. Because every big dream is just a stack of small days done right. So I kept going, 1% better in finances, in health, in peace. Each area lifted the others. That's how compounding really works. Small wins feed bigger ones until you're living in a completely new reality. Now, when people ask how I built a stable life, I just say, slowly. It's not the answer they expect, but it's the truth. The slower I built it, the stronger it became. Quick results crumble, patient ones compound. The 1% rule gave me back control, not through massive breakthroughs, but through small daily trust. It reminded me that change doesn't need noise, it just needs repetition. The quiet kind that builds strength while no one's watching. And here's the wildest part. After a year, I looked around and realized I wasn't chasing success anymore. I was living it. Not because I changed everything overnight, but because I changed something small every single day. So if you're tired of feeling stuck, start there. 1% better. In money, in mindset, in routine. Don't underestimate small beginnings. They don't look powerful, but they're compounding while you sleep. That's how a different life quietly begins. If this hit home, hit like, share it with someone who needs a reset, and subscribe to Simple Stroke Official. Because your 1% today might be the quiet start of everything you've been waiting for.